So good evening. Thank you. We have some more folks joining us from the lobby area, but we're so pleased that you decided to join us this evening. My name is Novella Ford, and I'm manager of public programs here at the Schomburg Center. We want to thank you for joining us for this evening's U.S. premiere of Rokhaya Diallo's documentary, Not Your Mama's Movement. The Schomburg Center, as you saw in the video, is a one-of-a-kind research institution that's dedicated to the collection, preservation, and interpretation of the global Black experience. There are over 10 million items in our archival collections, and I urge you to take the time to explore one of our 5 divisions. Here you can find rare books like first editions of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. You can also find Maya Angelou's personal collection of papers and so many other things. So while we love that you come here to our public programs, we certainly want you to visit one of our 5 divisions, which is reference. We have a division of moving images and sound. We also have photographs and prints, art and artifacts, along with, like I mentioned, manuscripts, collections, and rare books. Through exhibitions and film screenings, performances, and engaging conversations, we explore the historical and the contemporary narratives that continue to shape our nation and the world. Since we are in election season, I thought I would draw to your attention 2 events that are coming up next week. Next Tuesday, our Talks at the Schomburg will feature a discussion about politics, race, and rage with Dr. Carol Anderson, the author of White Rage, and Melanie Price, author of The Race Whisperer, Barack Obama and the Political Uses of Race. The conversation will be moderated by Akiba Solomon, who is the editor-in-chief of colorlines.com. On the following day, on a Wednesday, I believe that is, November 2nd, we will screen Chisholm 72, Unbought and Unbossed, which is a documentary about the historic presidential campaign of Shirley Chisholm. And I often think of those terms, unbought and unbossed, and hopefully I live up to those as well. Following the film will be a talk back with the film's director, Shala Lynch, who is also curator of the Schomburg's Division of Moving Images and Sound. I want to say thank you to any Schomburg Society members who are in the audience. Your support makes it possible for us to deliver consistent, high-caliber programming for the low cost of free to the public all year round. And as we turn to tonight's program, we are so pleased that Rokhaya and her team decided to bring this transatlantic conversation on race relations to the Schomburg. I want to thank a few partners who have helped to make this evening possible. That includes TV5 Monde, who co-produced the film and will be aired on U.S. cable on November 2nd. Caterer Mami Sal, BET France, France O, and Ponte Bistro. These are all partners that really helped to make this evening possible. This premiere film screening, however, is presented in partnership with the March on Washington Film Festival, which is a production of the Rabin Group, as well as EGM New York Productions, which is led by Yasmina Edwards, who introduced me to Rokhaya Diallo and the work she's doing as a journalist, filmmaker, and activist in France. Her powerful and courageous work dismantles the barricades of racism and sexism through the promotion of equality and pluralism. As one of the most influential Black figures in Europe today, Rokhaya's stance on anti-racism has been sought by both BBC Radio and NPR and many others. Rokhaya has directed and co-produced the documentary Steps to Liberty, Networks of Hate, and also among Rokhaya's published works are Racism, a Guide, France Belongs to Us, and How to Talk to Kids About Racism. With great anticipation of reaching out to the American public, her most recent work, Not Your Mama's Movement, premieres tonight at the Schomburg Center. Following the screening, we expect to have a very robust conversation with Rokhaya, another activist from France, Lumumba Akinwole-Bandele, as well as others who will join in the conversation. And following the screening, I will make sure to introduce them. But introducing tonight's film, please welcome Director of Not Your Mama's Movement, Rokhaya Diallo.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I'm really happy to see you all here. So first of all, I would like to thank the Schomburg Center for hosting this first screening in the US. Thanks to the March on Washington Film Festival and to the Rabin Group for supporting my work and for making this transatlantic conversation happen. I also want to thank the panelists, Reverend Jacqui Lewis, Shaun King, as well as Amal Bentounsi, who flew from France to share her story with us, and thank also to Lumumba, the moderator. Today, I really feel humbled to have this event here at the Schomburg Center, the center of the Black culture in Harlem, because we're having that transatlantic conversation on race involving France, so I think that it doesn't happen that much. Today is also a historic day for us French people, because tomorrow we will commemorate the 11th anniversary of the death of Ziad Bena and Bouna Traoré, who died in 2005 in the suburbs of Paris while they were chased by the police. They were 15 and 17. And further to their death, an unprecedented wave of uprisings started in Clichy-sous-Bois and spread all over France. It's the reason why I started my activism, and it's the reason why I made this documentary 10 years later. So the documentary that you will see tonight is my way of sharing our stories of us French people, and to use the African American activism as a way to reflect on what we are trying to do in France. So thank you for being here, and I really look forward to hear your thoughts after the film. Thank you very much.
So leading tonight's conversation is Lumumba Akinwole? Thank you. Akinwole-Bandele, who is senior community organizer at the NAACP-LDF and an educator from Central Brooklyn. As a member and organizer with the Malcolm X grassroots movement, he has helped establish its campaign to counter police abuse and misconduct. He also co-founded the world-renowned Black August Hip Hop Project. Black August raises awareness and support for political prisoners in the United States. Lumumba currently serves as an adjunct lecturer teaching community organizing at Lehman College, CUNY. Joining him will be the director, Rokhaya Diallo, along with Shaun King, who has written extensively about the Black Lives Matter movement, covering discrimination, police brutality, the prison industrial complex, and social justice in the wake of violence in New York, Baltimore, Cleveland, Ferguson, Missouri, Charleston, South Carolina, and other cities. He is a senior justice writer at the New York Daily News and was justice writer for the Daily KO. Amal Bentounsi. You may not know her, but you may have met her in the film. On April 21st, 2012, Amin, her younger brother, was shot dead in the back by a police officer. Doubting the official version of events, Amal decided to launch Urgent Collective, Our Police Assassinate. Its objective is twofold: to fight the impunity of crimes and violence perpetrated by the police, and to help organize and mobilize the families of victims. As the mother of 4 children, Amal had no prior experience as an activist when forming this organization. The tragedy that befell her family incentivized her to spearhead this movement against police violence, and we'll certainly hear more about that this evening. Joining Amal is her translator, Alberta Wilson. Alberta Wilson has carved out her specialty in English language services after accumulating extensive experience in teaching, editing, and translation. Her other notable interpreting assignments include the late president of Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, when he appeared at the Harlem State Office building in 1984. Also Ron Brown in Senegal, Jesse Jackson, Coretta Scott King, and numerous others as part of the Gabonese government and business leaders, including the late President Omar Bongo, for whom she worked for many years. Last joining the panel is Dr. Jacqui Lewis, who is senior minister at Middle Collegiate Church in East Village of Manhattan. Middle Church is a dynamic 900-member, multiracial, multicultural, inclusive congregation in which everyone is welcome just as they come through the door. Lewis is also executive director of the Middle Project, an institute that prepares ethical leaders for more just society. Ordained in the Presbyterian Church, Dr. Lewis is nationally recognized author, activist, speaker, and preacher on topics of racial, economic, and gender, LGBTI justice. Please welcome our panelists, and as they take the stage, please remember to use, oh, hang on. And as they take the stage, please remember to use the mics at the back of the room in time for Q&A. So there's one on each side, and Lumumba will let us know when it's time for Q&A.
Absolutely.
I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. All right, give yourselves a round of applause for coming out this evening, please. And another round of applause for Rokhaya Diallo and the film you just saw, please. So, we're here to talk about this historic time we find ourselves in right now and the courageous people that make up the movement that we are going to be discussing. We know that were it not for those courageous young people all over this country, in Ferguson, in Baltimore, here in New York, in Cleveland, we would not be having this discussion. Were it not for young people raising all kind of cane all across this land, saying unconditionally, stop killing us and simply no more, we would not be having this discussion.
Right.
So we want to frame this discussion in an understanding and appreciation for the moment that we're in and recognizing that this is a part of a longer trajectory of liberation, right? And so we have an esteemed panel with us today, and their bios were read to you, and I hope that you were able to absorb all of that. And we have a small amount of time, so I do want to jump right in, and we will reserve a few moments towards the end for some questions from the audience. And if you've never been to a program where I'm facilitating, I have a rule that during question and answer, it better be a question. All right? So I got a little magic thing to mute the mic. So we're going to try to make sure there's a dialogue and not necessarily an opportunity for you to get a soapbox thing on. All right. So I want to jump right in. And Rokhaya, please, first of all, thank you for the film. Thank you. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about what made you do this particular documentary and, like, why?
So thank you for still being here after the film. There are many reasons for making this film, but the first one is that when I speak to my African American friends about my country, about France, I'm always struck by this very romantic vision that they have about Paris. So don't make me wrong, Paris is very romantic, but it's not only a romantic city. People tend to think about Paris as the refuge it was to African Americans in the first half of the last century, for James Baldwin, for Josephine Baker, for Chester Himes. But they tend to forget that at the same time, it was oppressing people in Africa. So I was born and raised in Paris, and I'm the daughter of those people who were colonized until the early 60s. And these double standards still exist today. When you go to France as an African American, you will be very well treated as long as people understand that you're not a black French, because you're benefiting from this the fascination that we Europeans have toward Americans. So I wanted to show that Paris was not only this romantic city. The other thing is that 11 years ago, I told about them earlier. So Ziad Benna and Bouna Traoré were chased by the police. So they were young teens, they were 15 and 17. They were chased by the police. They had done nothing wrong, but they saw the police and they really got frightened. So they decided to hide in a power station, and the police let them die in the power station. And that's the reason why the uprising started in 2005. It's what I wanted to show about my documentary, that I wanted to show that we were still facing racism, the racism that has its roots in slavery and in colonialism, and to show that the French media tend to focus on what is happening here in the US and to omit that we have the very same issues in France. In France, we don't have the same data when it comes to race. We think of ourselves as French, so either you're French or you're not, but you're not black, you're not Arab, you're nothing else. So we don't really have figures to help us fighting, to make us being recognized as minorities. But we know that, in France you have what is called identity check. So if you go to the street, you can be checked, your identity can be checked by the police randomly. We know it's not random, but they can check you. And we know that if you are seen as an Arab, you are 8 times more likely to be checked. And if you are seen as a black person, you are 6 times more likely to be checked. And it's in those interactions that most of the police brutality occurs. The other difference that we have with the US is that in France, we don't have the same culture, the same weapons culture. So it's really uncommon to die in the police hands being shot by a bullet. Usually people, when they die in the hands of the police, they are victims of asphyxiation. So here, when someone is shot, you can film it and you can show it on social media. But what happens when you die hidden in a truck, in a police truck, or in custody? It's very difficult to show that. So it's the reason why I wanted to show that we were sharing the very same global struggles. And it was not only what was happening in America, but also what we were facing in France and in Europe.
Okay. Well, I think you were successful in talking about that, and we actually have with us Sister Amal, who is going to talk about some of her experiences. You happen to be the sister of a man that was killed by the police in France. Can you talk a little bit about your brother, what happened, and a little bit about why it's important for families of victims of police violence to be not only present, but central to the discussion of combating police violence?
Alors, pour répondre à cette question, les familles de victimes, en fait, très longtemps, elles ont été occultées par le gouvernement, par les institutions françaises, puisque quand nos frères meurent entre les mains de la police, c'est comme si leur vie ne valait rien, en fait.
I'll try to answer your question. First of all, when our brothers and members of our families are killed by the police, the government very often has tried to hide the fact, and then it ends up being as if nothing had ever happened.
Pendant très longtemps, les familles ont eu peur, ou souvent elles ont été approchées par des organisations proches du gouvernement pour étouffer cette révolte, cette voix qui pourrait amener à ce que les familles fassent du bruit et demandent justice. Et pour certaines familles qui croyaient en cette justice, en fait. Et du coup...
Very often, families of victims of police violence were simply afraid. And at other times, they have been approached by government organizations so that they could get to them first and they wouldn't be able to say anything about what was going on.
Alors aujourd'hui, c'est vrai qu'on a ce collectif que j'ai fondé en 2012 qui s'appelle Urgence, notre police assassine.
It's true that today we now have a collective that I founded in 2012, which is called Urgent. The police are killing our families.
Et pour nous, il est important que ce combat soit mené par nous et pas par des organisations ou des associations.
And for us, the families of victims, is essential to us. It's very important that we stay at the center of this struggle, of this fight, and that we're not controlled by outside organizations.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your brother's case? What happened in this particular instance, and where are things in your pursuit of justice in his name?
Alors, en 2012, j'étais une mère de famille, comme beaucoup. J'étais une commerçante, je gagnais très bien ma vie. Et le soir du 21 avril 2012, ma vie a basculé. Et,
Well, in 2012, I was just a mom, just an ordinary mom, a businesswoman, and I was doing pretty well. And then on the evening of the 21st of April, 2012, my life changed.
j'ai appris le décès de mon frère Amal Bentounsi et 3 jours après, l'autopsie révèle qu'il a succombé à une balle dans le dos par un policier dont le nom est Damien Saboudjian.
On April 21st, 2012, that's when I learned that my brother, Amal Bentounsi, had been killed, and we found out 3 days later the reason, the cause of death, was a bullet in the back. He was shot by a police officer whose name is Damien Saboudjian.
D'ailleurs, à ce propos, juste avant d'arriver à New York, j'apprenais que le policier allait être traduit une seconde fois devant la justice aux assises, puisqu'il avait été traduit une première fois où il a été acquitté par la cour d'appel de Bobigny. Et ce combat-là, il m'a permis aussi à changer la mentalité de certains procureurs, puisque le procureur, c'est l'une des premières fois, a fait appel de la décision et a utilisé le terme de permis de tuer.
And it was, I have to say something because just before coming to New York is when I learned that this police officer, who has already been tried and acquitted, will be retried. And I think that I was able to influence the prosecutor because he himself used the term a permit to kill. And so this officer, for the first time ever, will be presented with a court.
Donc à partir de cet instant, je vais vous donner la date du procès qui aura lieu du 6 au 10 mars 2017. Ce procès, j'ai envie d'en faire un procès politique, puisqu'aujourd'hui, l'histoire de la police va aussi avec la politique.
I would like to tell you when it's happening. It will be from the 6th to the 10th of March 2017. And I think that I have to take this opportunity to make it a political trial. I can't just let it be about a crime. It must be political.
À partir de cet instant, je me suis battue pour la vérité et la justice. Donc, comme je vous le disais auparavant, j'ai décidé de monter ce collectif offensif qui a pour nom Urgence, notre police assassine.
As I said a moment ago, when I found out what happened to my brother, I had to do something. And that's when I started my collective. Again, the name is Urgent Police. Our police are killing us.
Parce que le gouvernement français voulait taire l'histoire et utiliser mon frère comme bouc émissaire.
The French government wanted to silence the affair and use my brother as a scapegoat.
Manuel Valls, Premier ministre français actuel, ministre de l'Intérieur de l'époque, a porté plainte contre moi pour diffamation envers une autorité publique.
Manuel Valls, who's today the Premier of France, at the time was the Minister of the Interior, and he sued me for defamation against a public authority.
Je crois que le discours, je l'ai déjà commencé, mais je voudrais, pour moi, il est important de lier mon histoire à l'histoire d'autres familles de victimes. Et il est important pour moi de citer des noms, peut-être que vous ne connaissez pas, parce que...
I've already started speaking, but there's something that I would like to do at this moment, and it's important to me. I would like to cite the names of some of the victims. You don't know them, but it's just a very important thing for me that I would like to do. So I beg your indulgence. I will not translate.
Wissam El Yamni, Amadou Koumé, Abdoulaye Kamara, Laossine Aitungar, Oussine Bourras, Lamine Dieng, Ali Ziri. Sorry. Mamadou Marega, Rémi Fraisse, Morad, Karim, Adama, Ziad Ebouna, et bien sûr, tous ceux que je n'ai pas cités tellement la liste est longue.
Aside from the names that are mentioned, there are many more, but the list is too long.
Thank you.
Malheureusement, la liste s'allonge. Chaque année, on recense le nombre de 15 morts par an. C'est une moyenne de 1 mort par mois entre les mains de la police.
Unfortunately, not only is the list long, but it's getting longer. And every year, approximately 15 people are known to die in police custody. That's about one a month.
Thank you. Yes. We know that the names of those that are murdered by the police, particularly here in the States, are pretty much sent across the world by way of social media. And we know that, Brother Shaun, a lot of the research and writing that you do is really the way that many of us find out about these stories. But before we do that, I wanted for you to, if possible, talk a little bit about, in your historical hat, the distinction between the moment we're in right now, the movement that we see outside our doors, and the previous movements that have come before us. We know there's a thread. We know that we have continuously been fighting for our lives. And that's manifested in different ways. So what are some of the differences and distinctions that separate where we are now to what we have seen in the past?
Sure. Well, first off, you do such a great job translating. I speak English, and I almost want you to translate for me. Like, have you seen that Key and Peele
Yes.
skit where they translate for Obama? It's like, but some of the similarities between previous movements and today are painful because a lot of us were incorrect in our assumption that, and your documentary spoke toward this thought that with the election of Obama, that there was this notion of racial progress, and a lot of us, it was wishful thinking. A lot of us thought it was an announcement of better times to come. And what we learned and what the documentary talks about, which is powerful, is that actually it was the exact opposite, that it was the ushering in of a deeply bigoted, racialized era that we're in now. And some of what makes this current movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, painful, particularly for elders, is that they see the reoccurrence of things they thought we had overcome. And so this movement is different because the time is different. There are new tools. There is a democratization of media such that in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, even into the 70s, it was very difficult to have your story told. But because of Facebook and Twitter, because all of us in essence have a quality camera in our pockets, we're able to document and share stories of injustice in a way that just wasn't possible previously. But in essence, what we still have is oppressed people fighting against a deeply unjust system. And yeah, absolutely. And what touched me so much about this documentary and even this panel and her words is I think we are right on the cusp of Malcolm X's dream, Fred Hampton's dream, which was that oppressed people in this country would identify and create deep relationships with oppressed peoples around the world. And so what you'll see is the more time Dr. King, the more time Malcolm X, the more time Fred Hampton and other people in the Black Panther Party, the more time they focused on who outside of our community can we unify with, be it other oppressed peoples, be it poor white folk, which is what Fred Hampton focused on a lot, or Malcolm X and his travels throughout the continent and throughout the diaspora, that the government knew there was deep power in that. And there's something really profound and again, painful about the recognition that, wow, what we are experiencing here is not uniquely American, but that there's a global system of oppression and brutality and injustice. The encouraging part of it is that you also know that there are other people all around the world fighting that same struggle that you're fighting. And there's power in that. There's power in the realization that you're not alone, that people all around the world who don't even speak your language, but they understand your pain. Like when she read those names, that resonated with my heart because I know the power behind those names and the pain and the loss behind those names. And that's what these movements are always about, are about people who are experiencing pain and injustice, then trying the best they can to figure out what are the solutions, how can we move from awareness to change. And I think that's where we are right now. You know, we are 2 years, I would say 2 years into the Black Lives Matter movement. And the first 2 years were about us getting to know each other, about us making an assessment of what is this problem. And then there was this realization that, wow, this is not a broken system, but this system was created this way on purpose. Because if it was broken, it suggests that it was well-intentioned. It was a well-designed system. And what we've all come to understand is that no, it's not broken, but it's actually functioning exactly as it was built and intended to function. And that And that causes us to see the problem in a very different way. That this problem is not in need of a quick fix, a Band-Aid, but the system itself. The system itself that they are experiencing is deeply flawed. And so here we are 2 years in, and we're now, I think we now finally have our mind wrapped around the problem that we're facing. And we are beginning to build solutions such that our organization matches our outrage. And so our level of organization is just now, we're just now catching that up with our outrage. And I think when those two things are synced up, we'll begin to see the change that we want to see.
That's beautiful.
Dr. Lewis.
Hello.
Hello. So when we're talking about the composition of movement, historically in our struggles, we've always had central to our movements faith,
Yes.
spirit. Can you talk a little bit about the purpose and function of that, how you see that playing out today, and your role in trying to push that forward and trying to inform the narrative of what our freedom looks like, what our liberation looks like?
Oh, thank you for that question. And thank you all for wanting to have this conversation. Thank you so much. Beautiful work. Thank you, Rokhaya, so much. Yeah, we are a people who have come over a way that with tears has been watered. I love that poem from James Weldon Johnson. I think in the transatlantic bring our bodies across the ocean, we did not lose our sense of connection to the ground. We did not lose our sense of connection to the earth. We didn't lose our sense of connection to spirit that is both up and down and inside us. And maybe we got a different language for that. You know, we maybe came with one way to talk about that connection and got evangelized and began to talk about it in terms of God and Christ. But we did not, as a people, lose a sense that we are of the earth and of each other and connected to spirit that is ancient and strong and gives us resilience. So I think the church or a life of faith has been a source of resilience, a way to express outrage and disappointment, a way to grieve, a way to lament, a way to moan and mourn, and also then a way to celebrate small victories, to celebrate change, to celebrate the birth of babies, to celebrate crops that came, to celebrate that we had each other. I think we have to be honest to say also, though, that the church has been a part of the racist problem. The church is a white supremacist created engine. That I have to say that. I think as a pastor, I'm responsible to critique the church. I'm responsible to say that when evangelists left to go around the world to tell us how to pray, eat, sleep, and make love, we also exported white supremacy and racism. And I want to say further, the Church of Jesus, meaning Yeshua ben Joseph, who was not a Christian, but who was a Palestinian dark-skinned Jewish rabbi who was trying to make a movement happen, he got codified and empired quite quickly, became a product of the empire. So our holy texts have some corruption. Sorry, to break that down to you. The church writ large has corruption, and even still, it birthed a movement. Even still, it's birthed several movements, including LGBT movements. Right. So I'm proud of the way the church has done some amazing, productive, liberative work in the name of Yeshua, where the scripture says the Spirit of God is upon me, and I've been commissioned to bring good news to the poor and sight to the blind and liberation to those who are captive. That's our mandate. So when the church fails, it's because it starts thinking that there's something more important about personal piety and sort of a personal relationship with Jesus, and I am going to be all right with God, and not understand the horizontal imperative in the gospel to do justice works. That in fact, God is kind of pissed off, excuse my language, when we're not taking care of one another. That the church fails when it doesn't understand that the movement of love and justice is part of our mandate. Right. And so in Ferguson, my colleague Tracy Blackman was one of the few churches opening her doors to the Black queer movement leaders who was open to say, God loves all of you and all of you should come into this space. And do your work and feel a welcome place. I want to celebrate, as I critique the church, places where I see things happening that I believe are things to celebrate and be proud of. There is an interracial, multi-faith movement for justice across the nation that includes Sikhs and Buddhists and Jews and Christians and Muslims and agnostics and atheists who are finding a call to love as the love. The call of our time is radical love and justice. And that means everyone's welcome. Everyone's welcome. No matter who you love, no matter how you look, everyone's welcome. It means everyone's welcome, no matter how you pray, no matter what you sing, no matter what your song is. And I think we're finding in the streets that the young people are teaching us new faith songs. Yes. They're teaching us new prayers. They're teaching us new creeds, if you will. Because they see each other and they say, like the Zulu people, I see you, and therefore I exist. They're breaking down walls and breaking down barriers, and I'm super proud to be allied with folks who are doing that kind of work on behalf of us older folk.
Good. So I know that many of you have some questions for this panel, so I'm going to repeat myself and strongly encourage that when you approach the microphone, and we're asking you to make your way to the microphone now, if you have a question, that you do two things. One, make your question under a minute, and that it actually be a question. Okay? And we aren't going to have time to get all of the questions, but let's start, over here to my left, and then we'll shift to my right. Sister with the mic. Okay, so we'll start to my right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I don't have a question. I'm here with the mic.
Oh, she does. Okay, so the
Someone who
line is
does.
all on one side.
Here we have a question.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. One, thank you for the documentary. It was very powerful, and thank you to all the panelists. As an American who has fallen in love with Paris for all the romantic ideas, I definitely noticed the treatment, and I can honestly say I felt human. Like, I didn't feel like a Black person there. And so your documentary definitely hurt, being that it was kind of my escape from feeling, quote unquote, Black. And so now with that realization, because, you know, when I went, the first thing I asked her, where are the Black people? Where do they hang out? Where are the restaurants? When we do go there, or what do you recommend where an American goes to Paris? Like, how can we, like, bring it to the attention of other Americans, you know, that, you know, it's not all good, you know, to be there?
Thank you for your question. First of all, I feel exactly the same when I'm here. When people realize that I have a French accent, they don't see me as a Black person anymore. They speak to me about cheese, perfume, fashion. So it's my way of escaping racism from France. I think that what is different in France is that we don't have a very monolithic Black community, because we didn't have a history of segregation. So Black people in France, they have roots in many different countries, and so in many different African countries, but in French overseas territories. So you wouldn't find the same kind of neighborhoods that you would find here in the US. Even if you go, for example, if you go to Paris, if you go to the north or to the east of Paris, it's much more mixed, diverse neighborhood than the south or the west. But you won't see, a monolithic cultural Black community. You need to know people, and maybe the people will make you able to connect with other minorities. And the other thing is that we have people, so it's not, the largest minority is not the Black people, but people from Arab descent, from North African descent. So they are not Black, but are not white either. So they are actually the ones who are most targeted by police brutality. And especially now, because we, as you may know, we are facing a major wave of terrorist attacks that are made by people who claim Islam. And the thing is that people from North African descent are seen as Muslim. So there is a backlash from the state. We have been under a state of emergency for almost 1 year. Yeah. And the government is using the threat and the state of emergency to actually criminalize activists. This summer, there was a young man called Adama Traoré. He died in custody in the hands of the police, afterwards there was a peaceful march organized by his family, and the march couldn't leave its point of origin. The police stopped it because of the state of emergency, And it's what we are going through now. It's like close to the stop and frisk that you have, and to the, we were making fun of your Patriot Act 15 years ago, but we are facing the exact same backlash from the government. So I think that, yeah, it's not only the blacks in France, but also people from Arab descent.
Thank you. Thank you. The question to my.
You might have answered a little bit of my question, but why do you think in France there are more interracial coalitions between white and black people as opposed to here in America, where it seems as we're more concerned with the romance of interracial relationships on screen rather than the interracial coalitions of revolution?
I think that in France, we don't have the same vision of race. Actually, I was born and raised in France, and it really took me time to understand that I was black, because you're raised as being like just a random French person, and you understand that you're black when you face racism. But it took me, as I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood in Paris, the more I advanced in my studies, the less there were people looking like me, and at the end of the day, I was the only black. And that's when I understood that I was not seen as a true French person. But so not thinking of us as minorities, we tend not to stick together and to mix much more. So that's one positive side of it. But at the same time, we don't really have tools to organize ourselves as minorities, because doing so in France is seen as divisive. For those who speak French, people call that in French communautarisme. So they say that you are community-oriented, and it's against the ideal of the French Republic. So whenever you try to start a black or an Arab organization, you are seen as being divisive and threatening the French identity and the French Republic. So it's very, very difficult to organize yourself.
We have a question here.
There's a question to say.
Bonsoir Rokhaya, merci pour ce super documentaire, j'ai beaucoup aimé. I'm going to ask the question in English. So, as you said, French people that are targeted by the police or the government, whether they're black or from Northern Africa, they're not, since they're coming from different places, also the Caribbeans, they don't necessarily recognize each other, they don't necessarily have a collective memory of their background and their past and their struggle. How do you think a type of community, in not the community French way to say it, can gather and have a common voice for what's going on? And for example, Kemi Seba, he's very, he has a lot of people following him, but he's the only one. I totally disagree with his way of thinking the black nation and black race. But beside him, how do you think it is possible for us French people to gather and make our voice heard?
Merci beaucoup, bonsoir. Thank you for your question. I think that what we need to do now is to acknowledge our history. The thing is that in France, we tend to look up to the US. So whenever we have to praise a leader, a historical leader, a historical activist, we name Martin Luther King, we name Malcolm X, we name Angela Davis, and we never name our own leaders. Like Frantz Fanon, that you know here, is not really known in France. So I think that we need to reconnect with our own history and really to explore it and to celebrate it. And the other thing is, I really made this documentary because I wanted you people from the US to know what we were going through. So Amal, she named people like Ali Ziri, Amadou Koumé, Amal Bentounsi, Ziad Bena, Bouna Traoré, and hundreds of them. We know your Trayvon Martin, we know your Mike Browns, we know Sandra Bland, and I really hope that you will know our people that have been killed by the police, the victims of the global white supremacy. So it's a shared history. So we French people need to know our history, but you need to know it as well, because we really know you very, very well. And I really need you to understand that what you are going through, we are experiencing the same, not only in France, but also in Germany, in UK, and we will be stronger, all together, facing racism. Being only in your close border doesn't make you strong. So we have the ability, even if you don't have means to travel, by plane, you can travel through social media. I have been able to follow what was going on in Ferguson thanks to Twitter, and I'm sure you could do the same, seeing what is going on. Amal is doing really a great work. The Marche de la Dignité, the March of Dignity that she started last year was only started by women. And it gathered, thousands of people in the heart of Paris. And it was live on Periscope, on Facebook Live. So it's something that we can connect and do together. And our history is something, we can work on documentaries together to see the March on Washington, for example, in the 60s, influenced the first anti-racist march in 1983 in France. I'm sure that very few of you know that. But if we work together, we will make sure that our shared history will be known by everybody.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. So I'm informed we have time for one more question. So my apologies for those who are waiting. What I would encourage you to do, we are hoping to still have dialogue via social media. You have the hashtags of everyone on this panel behind us. So we encourage you to utilize those for consistent communication. And so we'll take the last question to my left.
Hi. So in the film, first of all, thank you so much for this film. It was so beautiful. It really opened up my eyes to, to what's going on in France, and I really appreciate it. So thank you. This question, feel free for any of y'all to jump in, but the film talked a lot about millennials and their role in, this uprising or revolution that's going on, and I just want to know, how can we mobilize together, when we see so many Black people that are still refusing to demand justice and they want to stay in the dark, and then on the flip side, there are still a lot of white people that, are refusing to join in this revolution for fear of losing their privilege. For instance, I'm born and raised from Dallas, Texas, so that's where my accent is from. But it's interesting that, not too long ago this summer, there was the protest where the 5 police officers were, unfortunately they lost their lives. But it was interesting that everybody came together to, mobilize, and we stand as one Dallas and yada, yada, yada. But we don't see that for all the other injustices that are going on that have still been going on. So.
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Lewis, please.
Yeah, I thank you so much for that question. And one wants to be shy about one's world. But I'm a pastor at a church called Middle Collegiate Church downtown, which is a multiracial church. And we're connected with Black Lives Matter folks, who are connected with white folks in Surge, S-U-R-J. Google that and look up. We're connected with Latinas. I think that we have to create more communities that are multiracial so we can do this movement together. I mean, there are absolutely clear mandates for Black folks to caucus and do Black work. No, I'm not kidding. And there's clear mandates for Native Americans to caucus and do Native American work. But the movement for justice needs men and women and children, needs Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, and First Nation people, needs straight folks and queer folks. We don't get to the new world, the world of peace and justice, by ourselves. So I just want to invite you to follow us, Middle Church. Some of my folks are here, and just come connect, okay? We've got young folks and old folks, mixed up folks trying to do the justice thing.
Brother Shaun, did you want to reply?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would encourage you, just in closing, to focus less on who we don't have and what we don't have.
Good.
And I get that, because it's irritating and it's frustrating, but no matter where we are in history, like, everybody didn't march with Dr. King, right? I mean, that's the best illustration I can make, is that it was really small groups of people outside of the March on Washington. We weren't talking about millions of folk. we're really talking about hundreds and sometimes a few thousand folk. And so we are enough.
I love that.
Those of us who are committed right now can achieve a lot of what it is we want to achieve if those of us who are committed organize in smart and intelligent ways. And there are a lot of ways that's happening here in the city and in other cities. And so the more you get plugged in, great. But then I'll give you some personal advice. You did ask a question, so I'll give you some personal advice. Part of all of our responsibility and our struggle is to ask ourselves, what is my commitment to this movement? Mm-hmm. And how will I live that commitment out? And when I speak around the country, I get a lot of young people who want me to spell out what their commitment will look like. Mm-hmm. And I get it, because what they're asking is if I can push fast forward for them and help them speed through a difficult period of self-exploration, of struggle. And so it took, where I am now, it took many years for me to find my spot, my place, to find my voice. And your responsibility is to find that for yourself. And because what the world needs is not you sounding like her or her sounding like me, but as you find your power and your voice, as you find your niche, and here's a quick way to find that for all of you. The question you should ask yourself is, what bothers me most in the world? Yeah. And I've done this exercise with college students where a lot of us assume that what bothers me is also the very thing that also most bothers her. But if we did an anonymous survey and we asked, one question, what bothers you most in the world, we'd be very shocked because we would have 250 different answers. Mm-hmm. And so what you need to ask yourself is, what bothers me? What bothers you the most? And in that, somewhere hidden in the answer to that question is your personal path, your purpose. What disturbs you is a unique fingerprint to your identity. And there are dozens and dozens of factors that created you to be who you are. And in that is what disturbs you. And when you can answer that, hold on to it. And in that will be your purpose. And then what you'll find is that there are communities of people who care about what you care about. So here in New York, for instance, there are communities forming around how do we create new policies that protect people struggling with mental illness, that protect them from police brutality. And so there are families who have experienced the intersection of police brutality and mental illness, and they're finding each other. But that may not be your thing. And so when you find it, you'll also find that community, and then you'll be able to sigh a breath of relief and think less about who's not with you, and think about the powerful ways to connect and mobilize with the people who are with you.
That's beautiful.
So please join me in thanking our panelists, our filmmaker. And before we go, because I am an educator and I want to give us all an assignment, you set it off. I think part of what I want us to do is to make sure that we find ways to contribute to this current moment, because if we're one of those folks who sit back and look at history and say, if I was alive back then, I would have. Right. If I was alive back then, I would have done this. Well, now's your time. This is the time. This is the time to fill in that blank. Yeah. Right? And so the very basic thing of finding out what is happening is important. I'm going to encourage everyone to look at the M4BL policy platform, Movement for Black Lives policy platform. Many people unfortunately accept this narrative that the current movement has no vision, has no agenda, has no directive. That is totally false. Totally false. Right. And I want you to make sure you're informed about it, and through that you can figure out how you can plug in. You can figure out how you would wish to tweak it. You can figure out how you can contribute to this space, because we need every single voice in here, and we appreciate you. So thank you again for coming. One more time for Rokhaya Diallo, Shaun King, Dr. Lewis, and Amal.